This podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health issues, we encourage you to seek help from a qualified professional. For support, please reach out to the South African Depression and Anxiety Group or the South African Federation for Mental Health on 011-781-1852. Your well-being is important and help is available. Hey, and welcome back again to our conversation around men and mental health. This is our series called Mind Matters. And a big shout out to our sponsor, Polo, for making us look very on brand today. I think to just pick up from the previous conversation we were having, just talking around accessing help. But I think before we get to accessing help, there are quite a lot of barriers that we encounter in our journey to get well. And I love what you spoke about there, Leon, that, we know of depression, we know of all of these different terms, but they might show very differently in men. And maybe that's a conversation you want to maybe lead us into in terms of what you've been learning from the research that's coming out now.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a very important part of the men and mental health conversation is to understand when we look at I'm coming at it from a suicide prevention point of view.
Yes,
so one of the barriers is, as I said earlier, men have terrible help-seeking behavior because of societal stigma and all the stuff that I guess we will still talk about and we have already spoken about. I think one of the other important things for people to understand, for viewers to understand, is that when we talk about depression in men, there's a strange anomaly when we look at global figures, and those figures also apply in South Africa, in that women are diagnosed far more with depression than men, but men commit far more suicide than women. And to commit suicide, generally, you would have been depressed. Depression and suicide kind of go hand in hand.
Yes.
So why is that happening? So first of all, us guys are not getting out there and looking for help, being vulnerable, getting diagnosed, getting on treatment. But the other thing that people often don't know is that depression in men can manifest completely the opposite to what we think of when we think of depression traditionally. So if I think about what Tshegofatso was saying earlier about his symptoms, that he had the sadness, the feeling low, the kind of staying in bed, those are the traditional kind of symptoms we associate with depression. But actually, in a lot of men, depression manifests in aggression, irritability, substance abuse, risk-taking behavior. So it doesn't look like depression. So your family, your friends, your colleagues won't realize that you might be struggling with depression and therefore you won't get the treatment you need. The other problem is that in the clinical world, diagnostic tools that are used for diagnosing people with depression have not been developed to the point where we want them to, where they screen and pick up depression in men effectively. So men often fall through the cracks when it comes to diagnosis of depression. And that's why we have this anomaly of women being diagnosed with depression more, but men committing suicide so much more. And when I say more, I mean there's on average about 1 million suicides that happen worldwide per year, and 75% of those are men. So we're talking astronomical figures. It's not just a little variance; it's a massive difference. So I think I think one of the important takeaways for viewers, and when we talk about mental health, is that if you see these kind of behaviors in men, it might be symptoms of depression that you don't necessarily would think is depression. So I think if you're picking up all of a sudden your spouse or your brother or whoever starts drinking excessively, they're aggressive, they there's a lot of risk-taking behavior, they drive drunk, it might well point to depression. And it's important then to try and guide them to get the help they need.
I'd love to touch on that actually, because you're so right. Me staying in bed and all of that actually came after my diagnosis. But before that, it was behavior like this, very small, subtle things. So when I'd go out with friends, I'd drink that much more. And my impulse control would be very, very low. I'd get verbally aggressive, verbally aggressive, physically aggressive, not beating anyone up, but just pulling, especially on my best friend, just getting very, very restless. And no one could quite tell, except for this best friend of mine who was actually studying psychology. So when we'd be out and I'd start exhibiting some of these symptoms, he'd just look over to me and say, "Are you cool?" And that would kind of click in my head that, okay, no, I'm actually going a bit crazy. But to everyone else, it was, oh, no, I'm a good time at a party, getting exciting, everything is fine, it's just a fun time. But that's so true. These little nuances we don't tell.
And I think the important thing is, when we talk about men and mental health and help-seeking behavior, the important thing is to never ignore those signs. Doesn't matter how small it is in a loved one, a friend or a colleague. If you notice that change or something that doesn't sit right, is to make the effort to say, are you okay? There's nothing wrong with saying to somebody, hey, are you okay? Do you want to go for a cup of coffee? You could be saving that person's life by getting them the help they might not have otherwise gotten. So really important to recognize that.
So you think it's all about the environment and who you associate with, because sometimes you have friends, that do the same.
Yeah. You know what I mean? So if I'm going 100, you're going 100 with me.
He's like, let's go. You know what I mean?
Matching your energy.
That's true.
And you find it a lot, because I spend most of the time in the township. For me, having had the career that I had, I learned a lot. To a point where you're going home or you're going to the township and you can see the difference straight away.
Sure.
And now you see the different behaviors, you see different people. Even in your family, because I have brothers, and most of them, they're like, yeah, man, can you buy us two?
Sure.
You get the first thing they need. Tafula,
sure.
Do you know? And as well, I get the beers, but you don't realize,
man.
Why are they? Why do they want?
No, it's sometimes so casual when we'd go away with friends for little Airbnb trips or whatever, and then when there was booze left over, it would be a joke that, no, I'm taking it. I was going to take the gin or whatever. It was like, oh, he drinks so much. But it's a casual, fun thing. You have a drinking competition with him. At that time, I'm trying to nurse some deep things. But it just seems like I'm the fun, heavy drinker. Let's play some beer pong. This guy's going to beat you. But I'm trying to drown some things right now. And no one notices.
No, but again, for me, it's a Kgaugelo. Where do you go? If you have a problem like that, as guys as well, we might as well, instead of saying, let me go and seek help somewhere, but where do I go?
Sure.
I'd rather go to Sbanban. Let me go chill out with the boss.
That's the therapy.
So, that's therapy. But then it gets even worse, because once you leave them and you go back home again, but then that's where, it even gets worse, because it's the abuse now. It's being irritated, it's a tough one where I think, for me, you look at, thinking, how do I help in terms of, because the problem.
Sure.
You can see. But who do I go to? Those are the challenges that, to be honest, we get to see. I had a friend of mine who lives not far from home, from my house in TK. And you know, he was acting funny. We know he's a joker. He's he's a funny guy. You know, when he speaks, he can go in every house and, you know, and just have fun and enjoy and eat and do everything. But the next time, but that's it, there is hanging on his neck at the back of the house. And you're thinking, but he was just a nice, funny guy, you know, he got on with everyone. But what is it?
Behind that laughter.
Behind that laughter, you know?
For sure.
And what is it that led him to... You have to be brave to take that thing and hook it on and just put that noose over around your neck.
There's a very interesting... And as you're saying this, I learned something around suicide that's quite shocking, actually, to say the least. And you use the word... How do you have the courage to even do that? You know, that you realize that some men, and we'll try to find the research for it so you can maybe post it as well, that some men resort to suicide as a way of, you know, I've tried everything else. And the most courageous thing I could do right now is to end it so that my family could inherit some funds from my insurance, right? Where I basically become that sacrificial lamb for me to be sure that my family gets taken care of. I think that's why there's a clause in insurance policies now where suicide is then, we have to look at it if it was by, you know, whatever happened there. So some men see it that, look, I can't provide for my family in any other way, but the best way I could take care of them is for me to not be here anymore. We see that as well when you start hearing these ideas that, man, he was so happy before he passed on. And that could have been like, I realized that at that point, there's nothing else I could do. And I've now kind of made peace with it in my own mind that by going out by suicide, then it's an honorable death. You know, so there's these very interesting ways and sort of sadistic ways that men end their lives, but to them it's courage. You know, it's courageous. I'm going out this way because there's no one else, right? That coming back to that, I want to be independent. You know, and that's also another one of those sort of stigmas that we face, or the barriers that stop us from getting help. As you were saying, Leon, you know, speaking about the difference in how depression shows up between men and women. We know that for men, you know, I'm rewarded in some ways for showing up as courageous. Even if, man, at work, it's going down, my life is not together. But if I'm at work, you even hear it. I want to work with these men because they got their stuff together. They don't come here all emotional, right? So we get paid and rewarded for it. But at the same time, at the back of my mind, I know that, you know, I'm not going to tell Leon that, man, you know, I had a fight with my wife last night and my mind is not together. We've got a project to work on, you know. I'm not going to get promoted. I'm not going to be seen as that guy who can handle pressure. So there's certain things in our communities, in our workspaces as well that, we want to be courageous, we want to be vulnerable, we want to be open, but at the same time, if I'm open, I'm vulnerable, then it's like it works against me. Then again, there's a double standard. You know? So how do we then navigate that double standard? And then I have to go to a therapist who might not be very aware of the ways of men. Might not be very familiar with what we go through as men. So there's also, I guess, an education in terms of, I mean, it comes from us as well, from us speaking. But we also need to let society know that, listen, I'm not well. When I say I'm stressed, what does that actually mean? Maybe it means I'm depressed or I'm anxious, but what does it mean? You know, I have my own language for it. And I understand that there's now the mental health aspect of it or the psychological language around it. But let's now talk my language and let's start introducing men's language into these spaces. Because, like I say, we don't understand it. If Keko Makau, for example, then what does depression there look like? You know, how do we speak about depression there? You know, as you're speaking about where do I go, you know, I often look at our elders, those fires we used to have back in the days, you know, men gathering around a fire and having conversations. Those elements are then missing from our communities, as opposed to then using those spaces as ways for us to engage. Now we use it as ways for us to get drunk and do other things. Now, you know, we go beyond drinking. And I often say that there's nothing wrong with having a drink. But it's always the third, fourth drink that's the problem. So we can drink and talk about mental health issues, but how do we then be wary of going beyond just a, you know, casual drink to now, okay, this is a drink to kind of just lighten the mood a little bit, but let's get into some heavy conversations. You know, so I don't know how you guys have seen in any of the guys that you know. Maybe you've had this conversation around, man, I can't talk to that guy about suicide because I'm going to make him suicidal. You know? I mean, Leon, we spoke about that a little bit in terms of, well, sure, if I ask, then it kind of brings it to the fore. Yeah, it is a little bit scary to say, hey, Leon, man, are you thinking of ending it?
Yeah.
Then maybe you were. And I might just be that bridge for you to be able to talk about it. So is it true for us to even say that if I speak to someone about suicide, or if I ask them, I'm actually encouraging them to actually go through with it?
My advice to people is always to be as respectful and as, I guess, polite as possible. If I see that you are exhibiting signs of suicidal ideation, so you're talking about ending your life, you're talking about selling all your stuff, in my mind, I'm going to know, look, this is major red flags. But I'm not going to say to you, look, are you thinking of suicide? I'm going to go, hey, KG, are you okay, man? Like, I'm a little bit concerned about you. Because I think it's also about respecting your boundaries. And I think I always say to people that, you know, I encourage people to be that person that just goes, are you okay? Do you maybe want to go for a cup of coffee? And if the person says yes, great. Then I go, okay, when KG and I are going to go for a cup of coffee, I'm going to have some suicide helplines on my phone. I'm going to maybe have some things for him to read, you know, something that can maybe help.
Yes, sir.
I might offer to help him find a therapist that maybe specializes in suicidal ideation. But it's not about steamrolling people. I think because a lot of times if you're that direct, if I'm not feeling mentally well and somebody hits me on, you know, straight with like, you know, is your mental health terrible? I'm going to back away and go.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But if somebody says, and I mean, I shared my story with you, because I've also had my journey with mental health issues and suicidal ideation and stuff. And it literally took one person who just said to me, are you okay? That changed the course of my life completely at exactly the right moment. So, yeah, I think it's just about, I would say to people, it's just about caring. It's just about caring about people. It's not rocket science. It's not, you don't have to be touchy-feely. So it's just about saying, hey, are you all right? Do you want to have a chat? Let's go have a cup of coffee. Let's just tell me what's going on. But being respectful, not overpowering people with, or saying, I think, you know, I've looked at your behavior and I've Googled it and it says
you've got 7 out of 10.
Of the symptom of bipolar. I mean, that's the worst thing you can do.
Yes. You know, but that's also Leon, that the opposite of advocacy, right? Is sometimes in our advocacy, we then maybe fall into those traps of thinking, okay, I've Googled some things and I've had some conversations. KG was talking about this thing. Okay, I think my friend, I think Tshego's got some issues. You know? But I think it goes even a step further. It is in creating the space, maybe to also prepare the person that you want to see about, listen, I want to talk to you about, maybe I see a certain change in your behavior. Maybe you seeing it in me. Do you have a few minutes for us to have a conversation about it? So you know what you're walking into.
But you know what? You know, it's a very, very difficult that because, you know, you might be talking, you know, I'll say possibly, because we all come from different environments and different places, you know, and you meet people as individuals and as groups. You know, some people are saying that, going back to that thing for drinking, some people say the honest truth that you'll hear from someone is when they're drunk.
You
know, when they're drunk, they'll just tell you exactly. But how do you respond? Because you might think, okay, he's drunk. Let me just leave him to sleep. I'll remind him tomorrow. Tomorrow says, I never.
What are you talking about?
Me, I didn't say that.
I didn't say that, And then somebody will blame me to alcohol. I was drunk.
It wasn't me.
Yeah, but such things like that. Do you pick up? You do pick up those things. But then when you pick up, you're thinking you're not sure whether. But is he okay? You know what I mean? What do you leave him like that?
When he's drunk?
No.
When he's drunk, I won't try and have an intellectual conversation with him.
We'll save it for another day.
When he's drunk, you're thinking, no, let him sleep over that, and then we'll see him tomorrow.
Yeah.
But then tomorrow, you ask him as well. You think, but this is what you said yesterday.
You know what, Lucas? My philosophy in life and my message I spread through my work and everything is, don't ever be afraid to ask somebody if they're okay.
Yeah.
Because the worst that can happen is they can say, go to hell, mind your own business.
Yeah.
But you've tried. Yeah. You've tried. You've done your human duty by reaching out to that person.
Yeah.
Because he might just go, you know what? Actually, I'm not okay. I'm drinking. Tshegofatso spoke earlier about, self-medicating with alcohol. Major issue when we talk about men and mental health. That self-medication to suppress, you said, to suppress the symptoms and everything. So, people have to get past the macho stereotype of, I'm going to seem like a sissy if I go, hey man, are you okay?
Yeah.
That's nonsense. It's about being, we all humans, and regardless of race, color, ethnicity, creed, religion, whatever, we're all human beings. And if you don't look okay to me, I'm going to say,
for sure.
You don't look okay. I'm worried about you. Do you want to chat?
Man.
You know what I've found to be powerful as well is leading with vulnerability. So sometimes people won't talk even when you ask them, but a lot of people warm up if you show your hand first. They're willing to show theirs. Like I can come to a friend and say, you know what, I think I've been drinking a bit too much these days, I'm speaking for myself. And that friend will feel the room that I've then opened up by me laying myself down. Say, you know what, me too, I think, actually. There's certain things that I've been doing that I'm maybe not happy about. So sometimes, people are defensive. You can't ask outright.
Sure.
But if I give you a piece of me, I find that you're much more willing to give something back. So leading with that vulnerability, I think, can be incredibly powerful. Once you get over your ego and pride, and you're willing to use yourself as a helping tool.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you must also remember, we're dealing with very big narratives and historical narratives around what a man is, So I always have to think about a person's idea of manhood as well, to say, hey, now I'm going to tell Tshegofatso my business. This guy is probably going to have it out on some book now next time. When he writes his next book, I'm going to find my name. I'm going to find different elements in it, right?
Yeah.
And we're talking about now the sort of hurt that we experience, or the hurt that we put on ourselves, and that manifesting in anger and all of those other issues, which contributes to another big issue in our society, which is GBV. And whenever I hear about these conversations around GBV, I always think to those men. I know I've had some conversations with some friends who've slipped up and raised their hand at a woman, and you also think about that. And when you ask them what was going on when it happened, chances are they were drunk. Chances are they were not in control of the situation.
Yeah.
So then you go back then and you think about the mental health within that setting, within that space, that home, right? And we might say it's men who don't talk. It's these people who don't. But I often see GBV as a bit of both.
Yeah.
Right? As the women might be seeing some stuff and maybe saying that you need to go get help, and me maybe not trusting the health system, me not trusting maybe I'm going to get help from a woman. I'm fighting my woman. I just beat her up, and I'm gonna go tell another woman that I'm having this issue. So there's that bit of nuance that I always think about. What's your historical narrative around manhood, and how are you managing your life? How are you managing yourself? Do you even have coping things that you can sort of reach to? You know?
Yeah.
So I wonder if you men have had any experiences around that, and maybe have you supported a friend? Has a friend come to you saying that, listen, I raised a hand, man, and I don't know what to do?
So my best friend, his father is abusive to his mother, and he grew up seeing this. And as we were getting older, I think he had a girlfriend in high school, and he came to me one day and said, man, I almost did what my father does. But I stopped myself. I kind of pushed the door, but I almost got there. And for me, that highlighted an awareness that I think is great. So he felt unashamed enough to embrace and say to me that he almost did this. Whereas maybe if he kept it secret and kept it to himself, it would have just festered, and the next time it might not be an almost. But he released that secret. He gave that darkness light by saying it out loud. And that made him conscious of it at the same time he was telling me. So every time he may feel that it's going to be firm in his mind that, man, that's not what I do, you know. So I think, men need to be able to speak about it without being immediately attacked. That's a difficult thing, because anyone who says, I considered doing this, or I may have done this, you're immediately cancelled. But we need to give some allowance for someone to be able to work out what's happening with them. Because they may not know why I have this instinct. But if I feel like I can't even address it, I can't even speak to someone about me having these thoughts or feelings, or me almost doing this, it's going to keep that person in a corner in darkness, and it's only going to grow, I think, and get worse.
I think I just want to move slightly away from GBV, but there's a very important point that you're touching on, and I think that's about that recognition. And again, I always say to people, you know, if you can tell yourself, or you can tell a friend or a colleague that, you know, I think I need help, that's half the battle won. That's the big step. Then it's just about finding the required therapist or psychiatrist. Or that's okay. It's not the easy part, because finding a good therapist that you connect with can be difficult. But just being brave enough and having that kind of emotional intelligence to say, and self-awareness to go, actually, I look at myself in the mirror and I don't like what I see, and I want to change that. That's like, then you've won the battle. Then it's just about, okay, practicalities, about how do we deal with this. But it's about, I think it's such an important part of this conversation is to try and cultivate self-awareness in men. To say, if you think you have a problem, explore it in yourself, admit to it, and get the help you need. But yeah, sorry, I slightly digressed, but I just, when you were saying about your friend admitting, it just sort of clicked with me that that's such an important thing, that he was able to verbalize that to you.
Yeah.
And in the process probably really helped himself. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm listening to that, and I think it's also a wonderful, I guess, reflection to have, to know that I can be aware of certain ways of being that are not helpful, right? But we're also dealing with a society that's very angry, and they want results now. They're not waiting for KG, for Leon, for Tshegofatso, for Lucas to be like, hey, you know, I'm still on my healing journey. I'm still going to therapy. No, they're ready to cancel you tomorrow. Not even tomorrow. The next hour, we want cops there to come and take you to jail. So I also think there's a much needed conversation around, you know, let's get these perpetrators out of here. But there's even more compassion needed for that to be able to be addressed in an appropriate way. I think when we quick to cancel and jail people and not give them the support, we kind of miss out on that element of what really happened to me, to connect with them in that way, you know. And you're speaking a lot about kokasi, and I think that's where a lot of those issues are. That we've also kind of discarded the youth now, that they're unruly, they don't behave. You know, these boys need to be taught to be this way. But we're not talking to those boys in a language that's compassionate and that invites them in to talk
true.
about.
No, it's true, because I mean, you do realize that I think in this time, you know, in the world, that we all need, let's say, we all need to be responsible as individuals first. And because like I said earlier on, when I go to the township, when people look at you, they see you 10 rands, they see you, but what do you do? You know, so we seek proper role models. You know, and not just be there as a role model, but be active. You know what I mean? Because I always said, I always tell this story to these guys. I said, everybody knows me. Everybody knows that I had a great career and thing, and I live now. I left Kasi. I live in the suburbs. So when I leave the suburbs, Kasi, I'm driving this beautiful car.
Sure.
So these kids, they see me. They're like, yes, I want to be like him. You know, when you leave Kasi, you don't even say anything to them. What have you left behind? You know, and you go back again and thinking, because I do a lot of talking to the kids at the schools. We do with the foundation where we have those sessions with the kids to say, sometimes I just say that, what do you want to be? Lots of them, they're like professional football. I said, what do you want to play for? They want to play for Man United, Barcelona. I said, but why? Because they're successful. But it's how do you get to that level? Because these kids are cutting corners. You're thinking, no, but you have to go through to get there. You know? Yeah. But they're not ready to go there to get to that point. They want to go straight to the point. So now I find out, no, you know, when we address these issues, we don't address them in a way that these kids should understand. And because understanding, it's a massive thing. You have to understand. You have to get them to understand. You know, I'm at this level because I went through 1, 2, 3. This was hard. You know, this thing happened, but in order to continue your journey, what did you do? Because it's not going to be a straight, smooth journey. And for me, I think that we have to take that kind of responsibility in educating, you know, our communities. I mean, I'm glad that you here talking about you and you, Leon, you know, as a professional. You know, you're giving your views about these issues, but how do we really, you know, as I said, who do you go to? Because at some point you think I need a facility to go to. You know, Kokas, they're close by, because Kokas, people think, okay, how much do I have to pay? You know, when you sell somebody, you have to go see the doctor.
Yeah.
So how much do I have to pay? Well, you know, those are some of the challenges that we have, that I think possibly those are the things that maybe we should look at, possibly having the access to facilities, access to people that can, you know, I know we won't help, we can't help the world, or we can't. But, you know, the best we can do as individuals, little bit that we can actually, you know, give to those kids, especially the youth. You know, I think the better.
Yes. Man. And I love that. We're going to talk about support systems in our next segment. But before we go over this one, I think what I'm hearing from this conversation is that there's a need to, I guess, have more of these type of conversations in a less formal way, and kind of let people kind of have a soft landing into them. You know, I think if it comes from a very high level, these stats, and, you know, go like, no, let me just hear it from people just talking casually about it, then it allows people to then realize that I could potentially be him. You know, that could be my friend going through that. Humanizes it a little bit more, right? But just I'm just listening to you guys now. I'm realizing for myself as well. by having these conversations, I've learned way more than I would have if I picked up a book, if I went on a course. Of course, yeah, I'll write some tests and stuff, but being able to speak about it, even though the language is not too perfect, you know, I then can use other people to then help me figure this puzzle out. You know? And I think that's another way to kind of break down these barriers. You're speaking to costs. You know, the cost of mental health is quite high, like we say. But I think in smaller communities where in Zim, for example, they've got these friendship benches. I don't know if you know about those, right? Where they have an old woman who you would come and sit with, an elder. So their wisdom would pretty much be your counseling. You know, you'll tell them about whatever you're experiencing, and then they would have a conversation with you, which kind of helps you understand life a little bit better. And that's where that idea of sitting around the fire with elders was a way for older societies to sort of manage their mental health, right? And that's, maybe there were mental health issues then, but we didn't really have them in the same way that we have them now. And maybe because of access to news and stuff. But then I feel like those communities had support amongst themselves. And maybe we could do that for ourselves, whether it's at, you know, after a soccer match, while we're changing in the rooms, while we're taking a shower, the drive to your son's school, just having that conversation in the car. Very informal type of stuff. I think it then starts building very informative conversations. It gives you a base to kind of work with. If you listen to a lot of the youth now, they sound very informed about the stuff. But I think for me, it's more about how they're applying it as opposed to how they're just talking about it. It's good to have the conversation, but now we want to move into like applying it into our lives. I'm not sure if you've had any conversations with youth, and what have you been experiencing with them?
I've spoken to some youth. I actually spoke to some kids in Mamelodi, and it was fascinating. They were very interested. And some of them are asking questions whereby you can see that they are going through some things. And these are young children, I mean, 8 to 14. And they're asking very almost intrusive questions because you can tell they're going through this right now, which is a scary thing. And then when I think of myself as a kid, I was going through the same. So how many kids out there at these young ages, when we think they're just playing, are actually battling something? And yeah, like you're saying, how do we make it applicable to them at this age? How does it transcend from being just information to being now, this is how we bring people up? And I love what you're saying about the informality of things, you know, and sitting around a fire. That changed my life, was sitting around a fire with a new group of friends who cared and were open and were vulnerable. That to me led me down a path of healing that has me sitting here today. It was simply that. It wasn't the times I went to a psychiatrist. It was sitting around a fire with these people who wanted to hear what I had to say and who let me cry. And for the first time, I cried in front of friends. And I think I started to cry a bit too much. I could see on their faces after a couple of weeks. Right? I think it's because I'd been storing so much. But sitting around the fire, crying on my friend's older sister's lap, man, I've never felt that vulnerable. And it's like this young boy who was traumatized finally got to exhale. In that moment, I had never had that. And it was informal. It was a braai around a fireplace, having a couple of drinks. But that, to me, it changed my life. And it can be that informal. I love that you said that. It doesn't have to be this huge thing. We just need to start a culture of talking. Whenever I see someone, can we have some depth in our conversation, some depth in our relationships? That little bit, man, it can change your whole life.
Man, I love it. Man, it can be a little bit, right? It
Just
doesn't
a little
have to
bit.
be.
Yeah.
Let's put it in there. So when we're having our brides, when we're having our conversations, wherever, like I said, use an opportunity. You'll find an outlet somewhere in there to let me just drop in a little bit of a check-in. You know, maybe we can do a check-in when we meet. I don't know. But we'll talk a little bit around this, how we can, you know, build support systems for ourselves and what's available within our communities in the next segment.